China's military says it's continuing large-scale military drills around Taiwan after its previously announced live fire exercises ended on Sunday. The Chinese Army's Eastern Theater Command said that it would practice anti-submarine attacks and sea raids. The earlier 4 days of exercises were Beijing's responses to US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to the island. Taiwan has accused China of using these drills as practice for an invasion of the island. On Monday, Taiwan said Chinese aircraft and ships had not entered its territorial waters, which extend 12 nautical miles from the coast during the exercises so far. The US, along with Australia and Japan, have condemned the drills, saying their objective is to change the status quo in the Taiwan Strait, the 180-kilometer body of water between the mainland and the island. Chinese aircraft and ships have repeatedly crossed the median line in the strait during the drills, but Taiwan's defense ministry said on Monday that the median line was a tacit understanding that has been in place since the 1950s, and its existence was a fact. Washington has also condemned Beijing for breaking off cooperation with the US in a number of areas, including climate change, in retaliation for Ms. Pelosi's visit. Beijing sees Taiwan as a breakaway province that it can claim by force if necessary. But Taiwan is a self-ruled island that sees itself as distinction from China. Any hint of recognition of this by world leaders, however, enrages China. The renewed activity around Taiwan comes after Chinese maritime authorities announced that drills would also take place in other locations. In the Yellow Sea, located between China and the Korean Peninsula, new daily military drills were due to start from Saturday until the middle of August and include live fire exercises. In addition, a month-long military operation in one area of the Bohai Sea, north of the Yellow Sea, started on Saturday, and on Monday China announced live fire drills off its coast in the South China Sea. So why have the Chinese and Taiwanese relations been so poor? China sees the self-ruled island as part of its territory and insists it should be unified with the mainland by force if necessary. How is Taiwan governed? The island has its own constitution, democratically elected leaders, and about 300,000 active troops in its armed forces. And who currently recognizes Taiwan? Only a few countries recognize Taiwan. Most recognize the Chinese government in Beijing instead. The US has no official ties with Taiwan, but does have a law which requires it to provide the island with the means to defend itself. Boris Johnson has admitted the current help for people struggling with energy bills is not enough, and said he expects more money to follow. Mr. Johnson will step down as PM in September, but said he was making sure there is extra cash for a successor to provide additional support. He also said people were starting to receive the money which the government announced earlier in the year. The topic of rising bills has come to dominate the Tory leadership contest. The two candidates to replace Mr. Johnson have set out differing strategies on how they would respond to the cost of living crisis. Liz Truss has argued that cutting taxes is the best way to help struggling households. Rishi Sunak has proposed spending billions of pounds on further payments to pensioners and people on low incomes, contending tax cuts will not help them enough. Elsewhere, Labour has set out its own proposals, including a plan to ensure prepay energy customers are charged the same as those paying by direct debit. Both Labour and the Liberal Democrats have also called for the government to raise money by backdating the windfall tax on energy companies. Speaking at Hustings in Cheltenham, Ms. Truss said she absolutely did not support windfall taxes, arguing it was all about bashing business. Last week, forecasts suggested that energy bills could rise to more than £4,000 per year next year for typical householders. Earlier this year, the government announced a £15 billion package, including a £400 energy bill discount for every household. Asked by reporters if this was enough, Mr. Johnson said no, adding, "What we're doing is trying to make sure that by October, by January, there is further support. I'm not going to pretend that things are easy for people right now, but there's more money coming anyway as a result of decisions we've taken. I think over the medium term, the future's very bright." He also argued that the price of energy would be brought down in the longer term by the government's investment in nuclear power and renewables. Earlier, Chancellor Nazim Zahawi said new cost of living policies would be ready to go when either Mr. Sunak or Ms. Truss took office on the 6th of September. Speaking on a visit to the Airbus factory in Broughton in North Wales, Mr. Zahawi told broadcasters, "We're looking at all the options of what additional help we need to bring in later on in the winter months." The BBC has been told one option could include expanding the windfall tax on energy companies. The current windfall tax, also called the Emergency Profits Levy, applies only to oil and gas firms, but there has been speculation that it could be extended to electricity generators. Millions of people face hosepipe bans as low water levels and Tinder dry conditions continue across the UK. An official drought has been declared in parts parts of southwest England, parts of southern and central England, and the east of England. The move is expected to trigger stricter controls on water use after Yorkshire Water earlier became the fifth water company to announce a ban. The Environment Agency said essential water supplies were safe. John Curtin, Director of Operations for the EA, said the drought would go on for a long time, as he warned there may be restrictions on crop growing and more bans brought in if conditions continue. Areas where the agency has declared a drought include Devon and Cornwall, Solent and South Downs, Kent and South London, Hertfordshire and North London, East Anglia, Thames, Lincolnshire and Northamptonshire, and East Midlands. Yorkshire and the West Midlands are also expected to move into a drought later in August. Ongoing dry conditions combined with July's record-breaking heatwave have depleted rivers, reservoirs and aquifers, leading to a number of water firms bringing in restrictions. Experts are warning that the dry spell could last for several more months, with analysis from the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, UKCEH, showing that low or even exceptionally low river flows and underground water levels will probably continue until October in southern England and Wales. The decision to declare a drought was taken after a meeting of the National Drought Group, which is made up of government and agency officials, water companies and groups including the National Farmers Union, NFU. Members of the public and businesses in drought-affected areas are being urged to use water wisely following the driest start to the year since 1976. Drought is decided area by area, and announcing one means government and water companies will launch plans to deal with it, with measures including hosepipe bans and taking more water than usual from rivers. Wales Drought Liaison Group, including environment, health and water professionals, is also looking at the effect of the prolonged dry weather. Yorkshire Water, which has more than 5 million customers, says that parts of the region have seen the lowest rainfall since records began more than 130 years ago. Elsewhere, Hampshire and the Isle of Wight are under a hosepipe ban, while Welsh Water is implementing a ban from the 19th of August. Thames Water is also set to follow suit with its own restrictions in the coming weeks, but Catherine Ross, Strategy and External Affairs Director for the firm, told BBC Breakfast earlier a ban would probably come in immediately after drought status was officially declared. Neil Dewis, Director of Water at Yorkshire Water, said reservoirs in the region are running at 20% lower than expected for this time of year. The firm had been doing everything we can to avoid putting in restrictions, but they were now necessary. Southeast Water, whose ban came into force on Friday, is asking people to observe restrictions on using hose pipes or similar implements such as sprinklers to water plants, wash the car and fill a paddling pool, with rule breakers facing a fine of up to £1,000. The company said its underground water aquifers were below average for the time of year across Kent and Sussex, and its raw water reservoirs were also at a lower level. Dominic Garner, a farmer in West Sussex, told the BBC the dry weather was posing many challenges for farmers. Everything is starting to struggle a bit, our grass is not growing at all, and livestock, we're having to feed them extra food. Adding crop yields had also been reduced by the dryness. A 4-day amber warning for extreme heat from the Met Office is in place for many parts of England and Wales until Sunday. About 3 billion litres of water is lost to leaks each day in the UK, accounting for between 20 and 24% of the total water supply. Alistair Chisholm from the Chartered Institute of Water and Environmental Management told BBC News that the Victorian-era system needed more investment to bring that figure down, but added that there was an improving picture. Met Office Chief Meteorologist Andy Page said UK temperatures had been rising day on day throughout the week, with a peak of 35 degrees expected on Friday and possibly 36 over the weekend. There will be increasingly warm nights, with temperatures not expected to drop below the low 20s in some places in the south. Temperatures are forecast to be lower earlier next week, and the Met Office has issued yellow thunderstorms for Monday covering most of England, Wales and Scotland. The situation in the UK is being mirrored across Europe. Much of the continent is baking in record heat, exposing riverbeds and triggering restrictions on water use in many areas. The Met Office's Fire Severity Index, which assesses how severe a blaze could become, is currently very high for most of England and Wales. The situation facing firefighters across the UK has been described as unprecedented, with increasing numbers of wildfires. Heat waves are becoming more likely and more extreme because of human-induced climate change. Research Institute UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology said it would require exceptional rainfall over the next 1 to 3 months to bring river, reservoir and groundwater levels back up to normal. But scientists have warned bouts of heavy rain after a prolonged period of hot weather could cause flash flooding. Robert Thompson, a professor of meteorology at the University of Reading, told BBC News the ground has effectively become like urban concrete and will not absorb water quickly enough to cope with longer showers. So what is a hosepipe ban? Restrictions on usage during hosepipe bans can vary between water providers, but generally people are not allowed to use hosepipes or anything that connects to a hosepipe or an outside tap. During a ban, people cannot use a hosepipe to water a garden or plants, fill a paddling or swimming pool, clean a car, fill a pond, or clean walls or windows. But you can use other water sources, like using your mains water supply, but with buckets or watering cans instead of hosepipes, or using stored rainwater from a water butt, and there are some exceptions when a hosepipe can be used. Anyone breaking the rules could face a fine of up to £1,000. Former Labour Prime Minister Gordon Brown has called for an emergency budget before the UK hits a financial time bomb this autumn. Mr Brown said millions would be pushed over the edge if the government does not address the cost of living crisis. Conservative leadership rivals Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have clashed over how they will address the high inflation. He wants them to agree on emergency budgets with PM Boris Johnson this week or for Parliament to be recalled. Writing in The Observer, Mr Brown said the reality is grim and undeniable. A financial time bomb will explode families in October as the second round of fuel price rises in 6 months sends shockwaves through every household and pushes millions over the edge. A new report commissioned by Mr Brown, carried out by Professor Donald Hirsch from Loughborough University, found that 35 million people in 13 million households across the UK are under threat of fuel poverty in October. This is an unprecedented 49.6% of the population of the United Kingdom, said Mr Brown. Findings from the report suggest the additional one-off £1,200 support for low-income households will fail to compensate for three major blows to income from October 2021 to October 2022. The loss of the £20 a week benefits uplift, the rise in the energy price cap, and an annual uprating of out of line with inflation forecasts all mean the worst off families will find it hard to bridge the gap. Mr Brown told BBC Radio's 4's World at 1 that action is needed promptly to ensure the benefit system and the computers that operate it are able to get help to people before October. He said there is a vacuum at the centre of government with both Mr Johnson and Chancellor Nazim Zahawi on holiday. Not enough thinking is being done about the major social issues, he added. If elected as the next Tory leader, Ms Truss has promised to reverse some of former Chancellor Mr Sunak's tax rises, including the rise in national insurance contributions. Meanwhile, Mr Sunak said the Tories can kiss goodbye to winning the next elections if inflation is not brought under control. The Bank of England has warned inflation, currently at 9.4%, could peak at more than 13% and stay at very elevated levels throughout much of next year, but eventually returning to its 2% target in 2024. Artists including UB40 and Dexy's Midnight Runners will play at the Commonwealth Games closing ceremony. They'll perform at the Alexander Stadium in Birmingham later to mark the end of the 11-day sporting event. It will also feature a sequence from dance theatre show Peaky Blinders, The Redemption of Thomas Shelby. Birmingham 2022 Chief Creative Officer Martin Green said it would celebrate the vibrant energy and cultural heritage of this incredible city. Wolverhampton's Beverley Knight and Walsall's Georgia Smith will also be part of the West Midlands lineup. Smith, 25, was named Best British Female Artist at the Brit Awards in 2019 and is known for a song Be Honest. Other artists include Apache Indian, Laura McBula, Coldy, Jacob Banks, JK, Ash, Mahalia, Musical Youth, Neelam Gill, Punjabi MC, Raza Hussain, Kalula Eve, and The Set Lecter. The show, which has been created by directors Amber Rumeli and Bronsky from Tor Box, known for shows at Glastonbury and the Brits, is aimed at showcasing the region's musical talent from the past, present and future. A sneaky preview of Peaky Blinders, The Redemption of Thomas Shelby, will be shown, including a performance from Laura Mulvey of a newly commissioned track inspired by Nick Cave's Red Right Hand, the show's theme tune. Written and adapted for stage by creator Stephen Knight and choreographed and directed by Rambert's artistic director Benoit Swan Buffet, the show's world premiere will be at Birmingham Hippodrome on the 27th of September as part of the Birmingham 2022 festival. The closing ceremony will take place in front of a live audience of 30,000, which will include a formal handover to the state of Victoria, Australia, which will host the 2026 Commonwealth Games. Kyle Newton was hoping for a break in the resort of Sanya on Hainan Island, known as China's Hawaii, after enduring a harsh 2-month COVID lockdown in Shanghai. His Hainan trip was due to last less than a week and was the teacher's first holiday in China since arriving, just as the pandemic broke out. The island lies in the South China Sea, just off China's southern coast, but on Saturday, after 263 positive cases were confirmed in Sanya, authorities cancelled all flights and trains out of the city. On Monday, the lockdown was extended to cover several cities after 504 cases were recorded on the island. The provincial capital Haikou, with a population of nearly 3 million, has been locked down and about 7 million people have been told not to leave home except for food and COVID tests, state media said. Smaller towns Wuxishan, Leidong and Chiang Mai are also locked down. Travellers must now present 5 negative PCR tests out of over 7 days days before they can leave, if they're able to book a flight out. About 80,000 tourists have been stranded in Sanya, according to the city's deputy mayor. The vast majority are Chinese, including numerous people from Shanghai. Mr. Newton from the UK says he has had to queue for about 2 hours every morning to get a COVID test, which means he has been forced to cancel work meetings. The situation is obviously disappointing, he said, especially for those from Shanghai who had already suffered the extended restrictions there. Everyone else who also came from Shanghai all in pretty low spirits, he told the BBC. While those whose flights were cancelled on Saturday were reportedly offered free hotel rooms, Mr. Newton said the hotel only offered him a 50% discount on the room rate for extending his stay due to lockdown. I'm okay, but there's a lot of families here who haven't been told anything about what happens after they can't afford it anymore and why the hotel won't also give them the same offer as the new guests. Mr. Newton said that information was scarce for foreigners unable to read Chinese, and he is not currently sure whether guests are allowed to leave the hotel. It's a case of having to join WeChat groups full of other stranded foreigners or trying to piece information together, referring to the popular Chinese app which combines messaging, payments and social media. If there is official information, it hasn't been relayed to foreigners by anyone. Ryan Hall, a professor at New York University, Shanghai, also said it was unclear how long guests would have to remain in their rooms. His room is booked until Wednesday and there has been no confirmation of the arrangement after this. Dr. Hall said it was his 4th period of confinement this year alone. Just 4 days after Shanghai lifted its lockdown at the beginning of June, Dr. Hall's residential area was sealed again for another 2 weeks due to a suspected close contact case in a neighbouring compound. When he was allowed out, he immediately travelled to Sanya, where he had to do 10 days of quarantine. My intention was to remain outside of Shanghai due to ongoing lockdown and testing regime there. Dr. Hall, a global mental health researcher, said that while lockdowns have demonstrated effectiveness in reducing the spread of the virus, they also take a significant toll on mental health and well-being. I'm concerned about how these lockdowns may affect people's livelihoods, which have knock-on effects on their mental health, especially among those with precarious work conditions, migrants and young adults. Meanwhile, for residents such as Simon Verichel, the food supply remains annoying but so far not impossible. Mr. Verichel relocated his family from Beijing to Sanya in May to avoid COVID control measures in the capital, which were then comparatively stricter. The Frenchman, who is a managing director for a firm, said that they had been able to get food through delivery apps, but it had taken more than 12 hours to arrive. Still, Mr. Verichel says he has suffered minimally compared to tourists. We have a place to stay indefinitely if needed. We are in a lockdown in our residence, but can roam in the yard. An abuse survivor can sue Visa over videos of her posted to Pornhub, a US court has ruled. Serena Fleets was 13 in 2014 when it was alleged a boyfriend pressured her into making an explicit video, which she posted to Pornhub. Ms. Fleets alleges that Visa, by processing revenue from ads, conspired with Pornhub's parent firm MindGeek to make money from videos of her abuse. Visa had sought to be removed from the case. Ms. Fleet's story has featured in the New York Times article The Children of Pornhub, an article which prompted MindGeek to delete millions of videos and make significant changes to its policies and practice. Her allegations are summarized in the pre-trial ruling of the Central District Court of California. The initial explicit video posted to Pornhub without her knowledge or consent had 400,000 views by the time she discovered it, Ms. Fleet says. She alleges that after becoming aware of the video, she contacted MindGeek, pretending to be her mother, to inform it that the video qualified as child pornography. A few weeks later, it was removed. But the video was downloaded by users and re-uploaded several times, with one of the re-uploads viewed 2.7 million views. She argues MindGeek earned advertisement revenue from these re-uploads, it is alleged. Ms. Fleet says her life had spiraled out of control. There were several failed suicide attempts and family relations deteriorated. Then, while living at a friend's house, an older man introduced her to heroin. To fund her addiction while still a child, she created further explicit videos at this man's behest, some of which were uploaded to Pornhub. While MindGeeks profited from the child porn featuring, plaintiff was intermittently homeless or living in her car, addicted to heroin, depressed and suicidal, and without the support of her family. Judge Cormac J. Carney's summary of her allegations says, MindGeek told the BBC that at this point in the case, the court has not yet ruled on the truth of the allegations and is required to assume all of the plaintiff's allegations are true and accurate. When the court can actually consider the facts, we are confident the plaintiff's claims will be dismissed for lack of merit, the company said. The judge ruled that at the current stage of proceedings, the court can infer a strong possibility that Visa's network was involved in at least some advertisement transactions relating directly to plaintiff's videos. But Visa argued that allegation that Visa recognized MindGeek as an authorized merchant and processed payments to its website does not suggest that Visa agreed to participate in sex trafficking of any any kind. It also argued, according to the judge's account of its position, the commercial relationship alone does not establish conspiracy. But Judge Carney said that again at this stage of proceedings, the court can comfortably infer that Visa intended to help MindGeek monetize child porn from the very fact that Visa continued to provide MindGeek the means to do so and knew MindGeek was indeed doing so. Put yet another way, Visa is not alleged to have simply created an incentive to commit a crime. It is alleged to have knowingly provided the tool used to complete a crime. A spokesperson for Visa told the BBC that it condemned sex trafficking, sexual exploitation, and child sex abuse material. This pre-trial ruling is disappointing and mischaracterizes Visa's role and its policies and practices. Visa will not tolerate the use of our network for illegal activity. We continue to believe that Visa is an improper defendant in this case. Last month, MindGeek's chief executive officer and chief operating officer resigned. The senior departures followed further negative press in an article in the magazine The New Yorker examining, among other things, the company's moderation policies. MindGeek told the BBC that it has zero tolerance for the posting of illegal content on its platforms, banned uploads from anyone who has not submitted a government-issued ID that passes third-party verification, eliminated the ability to download free content, integrated several technological platforms and content moderation tools, instituted digital fingerprinting of all videos found to be in violation of our non-consensual content, and CSAM policies to help protect against removed videos being posted, expanded its moderation workforce and processes. The company also said that any insinuation that it does not take the elimination of illegal material seriously is categorically false. Tinder chief executive Renate Nyberg is leaving the firm less than a year after becoming the boss of the dating app. Her exit was one of a number of management changes at Tinder announced by parent company Match Group. Tinder's plans to adopt new technology, including virtual currencies and metaverse-based dating, are also being reviewed in the strategic shakeup. The announcements came as Match reported second quarter results that missed Wall Street expectations. Today we're announcing the departure of Tinder CEO Renate Nyberg, and I have made some changes to the management team and structure that I'm confident will help deliver Tinder's full potential, Match Group Chief Executive Bernard Kim said in a letter to shareholders. Mr. Kim will take up the role vacated by Mr. Nyberg while the company looks for a permanent chief executive for Tinder. I've loved every moment of the last 2 years working with an incredible team on the magic of human connection, she mentioned in a LinkedIn post. The announcement also included the reorganization of Tinder's top management team, as well as a review of plans for rolling out new technology. After seeing mixed results from testing Tinder coins, we've decided to take a step back and re-examine that initiative. We also intend to do more thinking about virtual goods, Mr. Kim added. It came as Match, which also owns the dating apps OkCupid, Hinge and Plenty of Fish, said it expects sales in the 3 months to the end of September to be between $790 million to $800 million. That was well below Wall Street expectations and would mean the company would see no sales growth for the period. Mr. Kim pointed to the impact of the pandemic on people's willingness to start using dating apps and currency fluctuations for the disappointing figures. While people have generally moved past lockdowns and entered a more normal way of life, their willingness to try online dating products for the first time hasn't yet returned to pre-pandemic levels, he said. Match Group shares fell by more than 20% in after-hours trade in New York on Tuesday. Ms. Nyberg became Tinder's first female chief executive in September last year. Mr. Kim was appointed as Match chief executive in May after his predecessor, Shah Dubey, stepped down after just over 2 years in the role. When Mike Miners, a farmer in New South Wales, Australia, first saw a large black object sticking out the ground in a remote part of his land, he thought it was a dead tree, but on closer inspection and verification from experts, he learned it had fallen from space. The Australian Space Agency, ASA, later said it came from a SpaceX capsule. Experts described these discovery as rare and exciting, but said such events may become more common. The object landed on the 9th of July in a large area of fields, but was not discovered by Mr. Miners until several weeks later. 2 other pieces were later found nearby, and the ASA asked anyone who came across further items contact a debris hotline set up by SpaceX. Dr. Brad Tucker, an astrophysicist at the Australian National University, was called to examine the object. He's often called to similar discoveries, the vast majority of which turn out not to be space debris. This has been super exciting to see this all up close. I've never seen a piece of space junk fall like this, in a video he shared online. Don Palaco, a professor of astrophysics at the UK's Warwick University, agreed that it was very rare for space debris to hit land. While objects fall from space to Earth every day, the vast majority land in the oceans covering most of the planet, he said. What's more, the only recorded case of a person being hit was Lottie Williams, who was unhurt when a piece of space debris landed on her shoulder in Oklahoma, US in 1997. 2007. Other incidents include damage to buildings in Ivory Coast in 2020 from pieces of Chinese rocket. However, discoveries of land may become more common, especially as the number of rockets sent to space has hugely increased in recent years. The sun is also moving into a cycle of being more active. Professor Polacco added, a knock-on effect of which may be more debris falling to Earth. Perhaps more worrying is a study from Canada's University of British Columbia, published in July, which found there was a 10% chance of one of our more people being killed by space debris in the next decade. But Professor Polacco still says the chance of an individual being hurt is almost zero, adding, I don't think people need to be frightened. The likelihood of them getting hit is unbelievably small. Russia's military could be unable to operate the high-tech weapons and communication systems it has been using in Ukraine if the West were to tighten export controls, says a report. Almost all Moscow's modern military systems depend on Western-made microelectronics, say the Royal United Services Institute RUSI report. Moscow has found ways to bypass sanctions and export controls. If the loopholes are closed, Russia's military might be permanently degraded. Researchers for RUSI, a UK think tank, spent months in Ukraine examining 27 of Russia's most modern military systems, either captured, brought down, or abandoned by Russian troops. They discovered at least 450 different kinds of unique foreign-made components, most built in the US but also in other Western countries. Products from familiar brands like Sony and Texas Instruments are turning out on the battlefields in Russian weapons systems. There is no suggestion those firms have been complicit in sending components to Russia. Jack Watling, a senior research fellow at RUSI and one of the authors of the 60-page report, told the BBC there was a chance to permanently deny Russia access to these sensitive components, many of which are manufactured in the US, but also in Switzerland, the Netherlands, UK, Germany, and France. If these components can be denied, then the Russians will not be able to replenish the arsenal of equipment they have expanded in Ukraine, Dr. Watling says. He points to Russia's heavy reliance on artillery, missiles, and rockets that have devastated the towns and villages of eastern Ukraine and allowed Russian ground forces to make slow incremental advances through a shattered wasteland. The Russian system of fighting is largely dependent on what's called reconnaissance strike, finding your targets and then hitting them with overwhelming firepower, he says. And what we found is that almost every link in that chain is dependent on Western components. Russia's fleet of battlefield drones, which scout out the locations of Ukrainian positions before they can be bombarded with artillery, also uses imported microelectronics, cameras, and communication systems. All are high-spec and many should be subject to export controls. In order for long-range ballistic and cruise missiles to be accurate, says Dr. Watling, they have to have Western-made microchips. So how exactly has Russia been able to get its hands on these high-tech components? It seems to have found several methods. A clandestine network has been in existence in some form since Soviet times. Operated by Russian intelligence officers, it used intermediate shipment hubs like Hong Kong and Malaysia. In addition, some companies exporting these vital components are unaware of who the end user really is. Others are said to prefer not to ask too many questions. The report's authors believe time is running out to prevent new illicit pipelines being set up that will keep Russia's military supplied with these vital components. In order to cut off what the report calls this Silicon Lifeline and permanently degrade Russia's ability to wage the kind of warfare it has in Ukraine, the West now has a unique window of opportunity to tighten export license controls before it is too late. Russia, it concludes, is scrambling to procure what it can in bulk before the net closes. The time to act is now, says the RUSI report. Actor Roger E. Mosley, who appeared in all 8 seasons of the original Magnum PI, has died aged 83. He portrayed Theodore T.C. Calvin, the helicopter pilot and friend of Tom Selleck's character. Mosley died from injuries sustained in a car accident in Linwood, Los Angeles last week. His daughter, Cha'a, who previously told followers about the car crash, confirmed his death to The Hollywood Reporter. She later wrote on Facebook, "We could never mourn such an amazing man. He would hate any crying done in his name. It is time to celebrate the legacy he left for us all. I love you, Daddy. You love me too. My heart is heavy, but I am strong. I will care for Mummy, your love of almost 60 years. You raised me well, and she is in good hands. Rest easy." His friend, Tina Andrews, tweeted, "What a sweet man and a fine actor who gave great parties. R.I.P. Roger. You are loved and shall be missed." Mosley played musician Huddy Later, known for the Midnight Special in 1976, Lead Belly, a performance which was praised by critics. He also appeared in The Mac, Hitman, The Greatest, Darktown Strutters, and Sweet Jesus Preacher Man. But Mosley's most high-profile role was in Magnum PI, which saw him appear in 158 out of 162 episodes between 1980 and 1988. The series was created by Donald Belisario and Glenn A. Larson, and Mosley's character TC was a buddy of Selleck's Thomas Magnum from their days in Vietnam. His character owned a helicopter charter company in Oahu called Island Hoppers, which came in handy on the series that aired from December 1980 until May 1988. According to Mosley, his co-star Selleck recommended him for the part after they worked together on 1973's Terminal Island. Producers had reportedly considered casting Gerald McRaney before deciding they needed a person of colour in the principal cast. Mosley was working on films at the time and did not want a job on a television show, but his agent talked him into doing the Magnum pilot. As Mosley remembered it, his agent told him, "It's starring this guy, Tom Selleck. Tom Selleck has made about 5 pilot shows and none of them has sold. So here's what you do, Roger. Sign up for the show, go over to Hawaii, they'll treat you good for the 20 days it will take to shoot for the pilot. You'll get a lot of money and then you can come home. A show with Tom Selleck always fails and you'll be fine." Mosley then joked, well, 8.5 years later, the act felt strongly that his character should be a university graduate, a lover of books and poetry, and a guy who didn't party. They, the Magnum writers, kept writing for me to smoke and drink, but I won't do it, he said in a 1982 interview in Ebony. "I never got high, smoke or drink on the show or in real life. That's not what I want black kids to see." Mosley did less acting in his later years and mostly stopping appearing in films and TV shows around 2010. However, he did guest star in 2 episodes of the revived Magnum PI, which launched in 2018, starring Jay Hernandez and Perdita Weeks. A ceasefire between Israel and Palestinian militants in the Gaza Strip appears to be holding. The Egypt-brokered truce followed 3 days of violence, with Israel targeting the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ, and militants firing rockets into Israel. At least 44 Palestinians died in the most serious flare-up since an 11-day conflict in May 2021. On Monday, Israel began lifting its blockade of the Strip, allowing the first fuel tankers to enter. The latest violence began with attacks by Israel on sites in the Gaza Strip, its military saying that it was in response to threats from the militant group. It followed days of tensions after Israel arrested a senior PIJ member in the occupied West Bank. By Sunday evening, the Palestinian Health Ministry said that 15 children had been confirmed among the 44 deaths recorded. Gaza's health ministry has blamed Israeli aggression for the deaths of Palestinians and for the more than 300 people wounded. Israel, for its part, says it hit 170 PIJ targets during the operation, codenamed Breaking Dawn, killing several high-ranking PIJ members and destroying tunnels and weapons storage sites. A spokesman for the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, said they had been informed about 35 Palestinian deaths. 11 of them were uninvolved civilian casualties, including the wives of the terror group's commanders in the south, victims of the IDF attacks. Another 15 civilians were killed by PIJ fire. Jen Kojab said 1,100 projectiles were fired from the Gaza Strip during the flare-up, with 200 landing inside Gaza. He said more Palestinians had died from those rockets that had exploded inside the Strip than from IDF fire, and added that Israel would investigate the deaths of civilians, including children. No Israeli casualties have been reported, with the exception of a few people lightly injured from debris on Saturday. The ceasefire was mediated by Egypt, which has acted as an intermediary between Israel and Gaza in the past. But as it came into effect late on Sunday, the Israeli military confirmed it was striking Palestinian Islamic Jihad targets in Gaza in response to rockets fired just before. Israeli media also reported some isolated rocket fire from Gaza in the minutes after the deadline. US and United Nations leaders urged both sides to continue to observe the ceasefire. In a statement, US President Joe Biden praised the truce and called on all parties to fully implement it and to ensure fuel and humanitarian supplies are flowing into Gaza. He also urged that reports of civilian casualties should be investigated in a timely manner. Concerns over the humanitarian situation in Gaza, where health officials warned that hospitals only had enough fuel to run generators for another 2 days, led to the ceasefire deal being agreed. So in terms of the basics of the Gaza Strip, it's home to about 2 million people. It's one of the most densely populated areas in the world. It is run by the militant Islamist group Hamas, with rival Palestinian Authority, recognized internationally as representing all Palestinians, governing part of the West Bank. And the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, one of several militant groups operating in Gaza, cooperates with Hamas, but also maintains its own independence. As the truce held, restrictions on Gaza began to be lifted. Humanitarian aid started arriving as the major crossings into the Strip closed 6 days ago were reopened, Israel said. They would return to full routine, subject to calm in the area, a statement mentioned. The latest conflict closely follows Israel's arrest of Bassem Saadi, reported to be the head of PIJ in the West Bank, a week ago. He was held in the Jenin area as part of a series of arrest operations after a wave of attacks by Israeli Arabs and Palestinians that left 17 Israelis and 2 Ukrainians dead. 2 of the attackers came from the Jenin district. Large crowds gathered on Sunday for the funerals of those killed in strikes on Rafah in the south of the territory. These included senior PIJ commander Khaled Mansour, the second top militant to have died. Demonstrations in support of Gaza have also been held held in the West Bank city of Nablus. PIJ, which is one of the strongest militant groups operating in Gaza, is backed by Iran and has its headquarters in the Syrian capital Damascus. It has been responsible for many attacks, including rocket fire and shootings against Israel. In November 2019, Israel and PIJ fought a 5-day conflict following the killing by Israel of a PIJ commander who Israel said had been planning an imminent attack. The violence left 34 Palestinians dead and 111 injured, while 63 Israelis needed medical treatment. Israel said 25 of the Palestinians killed were militants, including those hit while preparing to launch rockets. Sandeep Chaturvedi, 26, is readying to record his new song in a makeshift studio in the city of Ayodhya in India's northern state of Uttar Pradesh. The song is about a mosque that has become a subject of controversy after Hindus claim the right to worship there. It's riddled with innuendos against Muslims, but Chaturvedi says the song could get him back in business. His songs are part of a growing trend of music on YouTube and other social media platforms where supporters of the Hindu right-wing spew venom at Muslims. The lyrics are abusive or threatening. They're usually based on the premise that Hindus have suffered for centuries at the hands of Muslims and now it's payback time. Writer and political analyst Nilanjan Mukherjee says that in addition to being a source of income, such music fetches their singers some attention. But for him, this is not music. This is a war cry. It's as if music is being used to win a war. This is a misuse of music, and this has been happening for years. He started his career as a singer of devotional songs about a decade ago, but he changed tack a few times later when he decided to compose songs about Hinduism and nationalism. The idea, he says, was to get an image makeover. He hit a jackpot of sorts when a music video he produced in 2016 became an overnight amongst the right-wing Hindu nationalist ecosystem. The lyrics are too incendiary to be reproduced, but the tone of the song was straightforward, a warning to the Muslim community about what will happen the day Hindu nationalism rises. He says this song garnered millions of views on YouTube before his channel got suspended, following thousands of complaints. He blames Islam for reporting his song as inappropriate content. He rues losing millions of subscribers, but refuses to divulge the money he was making from YouTube. He said it cost him around 20,000 rupees to create a music video. I wasn't making much money from YouTube. What's more important is the recognition I got as a nationalist revolutionary singer. He has since created a new channel on YouTube, but the number of views on some of the content he uploaded has not been encouraging. He's hoping to change that with his latest song. Often accused of targeting Muslims through his music, he is unapologetic. If I lead with folded hands to get what is mine, will you agree? You won't. So we have to be provocative, don't we? Prenda Rana is another creative making similar music in Dadri near Delhi. His mission is to correct history, and his songs are hens, Hindu warriors, where Muslim rulers are portrayed as villains. Many things that are true have been hidden while falsehoods have been imposed on us, he claims, while talking about the history taught in schools. Rana says that he gets a steady income from the videos he uploads on YouTube. We are bringing a foreign currency to India. YouTube pays in dollars. He beams, pointing at a wall-mounted YouTube silver play button that shares space with images and portraits of Hindu warriors. Ever since Rana moved on from composing devotional and romantic songs to ones with historical overtones, he has become a kind of star in Dadri. He has close to 400,000 subscribers on YouTube, and many of his songs have been viewed millions of times. Rana says that creating a music video costs him a mere 8,000 rupees. He has his own setup to record and edit videos, and a team comprising a camera person and an editor. Mr. Mukherjee says the trend of weaponizing music against minorities is reminiscent of events that have occurred in the past. He recalls the controversial foundation stone-laying program in the Ayodhya in 1989, organized by the right-wing Vishwa Hindu Parishad, which culminated in the demolition of the Babri Mosque in 1992. Just before that, an industry of audio tapes had sprung up. They contained religious songs and so-called provocative slogans related to the Ram Janmabhoomi issue. Hindus believe that Ayodhya is Lord Ram's birthplace, and these tapes used to be played in procession to mobilize people. 3 decades on, the tone has been shriller. Compositions proclaiming if you want to live in India, learn to say I praise you mother and learn to live with your limits, or thinking of Hindus as weak is the enemy's mistake, make no effort to hide who they are targeting. These songs have also helped right-wing organizations mobilize their cadres. Youngsters like these songs as they raise their enthusiasm and morale, says Pinky Chowdhury, who heads the right-wing Hindu Raksha Dal group. He argues that such songs help create awareness among the youth. I feel a sudden rush of energy when I listen to these songs. They remind me of the things we were subjected to at one point of time and where we have reaches now. A sketch artist currently pursuing his studies from the Lalit Kala Academy, the India's national National Academy of Fine Arts, Mr. Yadav, 23, says he loves listening to this kind of music. This sudden rush of energy Mr. Yadav talks about was believed to be on the display this April when violent clashes were reported from several sites during Hindu festivals. During these incidents, offensive music blared through loudspeakers when Hindus took out religious processions and moved closer to Muslim-dominated areas. In some of these clashes, incendiary and provocative songs, including the composition from 2016, were allegedly instrumental in triggering the violence. The man responsible denies the allegations. "I'm just trying to create awareness through my music. Nothing comes from love. We have to fight and snatch what is ours." French rescuers desperately trying to save a beluga whale trapped in the River Seine say there's little hope it will survive. Rescuers had hoped to help the lost whale regain its appetite and the energy needed to return to sea. The visibly malnourished mammal was first spotted in the river on Tuesday, around 70 kilometers north of Paris. After failed attempts to encourage it to swim out, rescuers are pessimistic about its chances of survival. So far, rescuers have offered up frozen herring and live trout for the 4-meter whale to eat, but the animal does not appear to have accepted either. Authorities have considered injecting the stranded animal with vitamins to stimulate its appetite and help it to make the 160-kilometer return journey back up the river and out to the English Channel, where it can swim back to its Arctic habitat. But leaving it in the warm, stagnant water between the lock gates is no longer an option. He has to be moved in the coming 24 to 48 hours. These conditions are not good for him, Sea Shepherd France head Lamia Esamalia told the AFP news agency. Specialists are holding out little hope for the visibly underweight whale, he said. "We are all doubtful about its own ability to return to the sea. Even if we drove it with a boat, that would be extremely dangerous, if not impossible." However, euthanasia has been ruled out for now. Officials said on Saturday that small spots had appeared on the whale's skin, but it was not clear yet whether this was a reaction to the fresh water of the River Seine as opposed to its natural saltwater habitat or a sign of the animal's deteriorating health. Scientific observers said the whale was behaving skittishly, rising to the surface only briefly and emitting fewer of the songs expected of the whale, raising further concerns over its well-being. Experts are puzzled how the whale managed to stray so far from its natural habitat, the cold waters of the Arctic and subarctic. Belugas occasionally venture south in the autumn to feed as ice forms, but it is rare for them to travel so far from their native home. But similar stories are not unheard of. In May, a killer whale was found dead after swimming up the River Seine in Normandy. A plan to guide the 4-meter male orca back to the sea using sound stimuli failed, and experts later concluded it was seriously ill. In 2019, a dead whale was found in the River Thames near Gravesend, UK officials said. This came just weeks after a humpback whale seen swimming in the same stretch of water had died. It was thought to have been found its way into the Thames because of a navigational error, possibly during high tides. A clip has emerged of ex-Chancellor Rishi Sunak saying he diverted public money from deprived urban areas. In a video obtained by the New Statesman, Mr. Sunak tells an audience in Tunbridge Wells, Kent, he wanted to ensure areas like this got the funding they deserved. Defending his remarks, Mr. Sunak said he was arguing that towns and rural areas needed help, not just big urban areas. Labour said the leadership race was revealing the Tories' true colours. The party's shadow levelling up secretary Lisa Nandy said it's scandalous that Rishi Sunak is openly boasting that he fixed the rules to funnel taxpayers' money to prosperous Tory shires. Miss Nandy has written to Levelling Up Secretary Greg Clark, asking him to urgently investigate the changes made by Mr. Sunak to funding formulas. In a clip filmed on the 29th of July, Mr. Sunak says, "I managed to start changing the funding formulas to make sure areas like this are getting the funding they deserve. We inherited a bunch of formulas from Labour that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas, and that needed to be undone. I started the work of undoing that." Mr. Sunak's team has said his comments were in reference to the introduction of the Levelling Up Fund and changes made to Treasury formulas on investment. The government has changed the way it assesses projects by altering the Treasury's Green Book, which guides ministers in making investment decisions. Some submissions to a review of the Green Book in 2020 suggested that the old system relied too much on cost-benefit analysis, how much monetary value can be created for how many people, and that this skewed the system towards building more infrastructure in London and the southeast of England. But as Tunbridge Wells is in the southeast of England, changing that would not necessarily help it. It is also the least deprived local authority in Kent, according to the Index of Multiple Deprivation. The system was changed to require projects to explain how they would promote government priorities, such as levelling up or achieving net zero emissions, before considering their costs and benefits. This means funding will not necessarily go to the deprived urban areas where the largest number of people might benefit, but can instead go to more sparsely populated areas that have not yet received much investment in the past. During a hustings event in Eastbourne on Friday night, Mr. Sunak defended his comments by suggesting showing that deprivation existed across the country. Acknowledging the video clip, he explained that he wanted to level up everywhere, saying that he was not about helping just a few people, but very large urban cities. He added, "I believe it's about investing in leveling up in small towns and rural communities, in coastal communities like those in the southeast." Earlier, Tees Valley Mayor Ben Helsh, a Sunak supporter, told BBC Radio 4's World at One programme the clip had been taken out of context, adding that what he was getting across was why it is that poorer urban areas receive significantly higher funding than poor rural or town areas. He said places such as Devon, Teesside and parts of Tunbridge Wells needed fairer funding, but Conservative MP and Trust's ally Jake Berry tweeted in public, "Rishi Sunak claims he wants to level up the north, but here he boasts about trying to funnel vital investment away from deprived areas. He says one thing and does another." A source in the rival Liz Truss campaign said levelling up isn't about pitting one area of the country against another or laying dividing lines between urban versus rural, towns versus cities. It is about unleashing growth and making sure every individual has the chance to thrive. Liz has a plan to create an aspiration nation based on equality of opportunity and will deliver it in a conservative way. Rishi Sunak's comments appear to fly in the face of recent conservative rhetoric about levelling up and securing Labour's former Red Wall. Why would the former Chancellor be boasting about diverting funding away from deprived areas? In short, because he was in Tunbridge Wells at the time, one of his party's traditional heartlands, speaking to grassroots members. And while the Conservative Party doesn't publish data on its membership, research shows most of them live in the southeast of England and are generally older and relatively wealthy. Mr. Sunak's team insists he was talking about changes to ensure pockets of deprivation in towns and rural areas got the funding they deserved. His opponents will seize on his comments as not just clumsy, but another example of him appearing to be out of touch. The comments were made as part of Mr. Sunak's campaign bid to replace Boris Johnson as Conservative leader and Prime Minister. He's competing against Ms Truss, who polls suggest is more popular among Conservative members. Friday night's hustings saw a brief disturbance when Ms Truss' opening remarks were interrupted by a small group of climate activists who were believed to be from the Green New Deal Rising Group. The protesters heckled Ms Truss over climate change and energy bills, shouting, "Shame on you." After the group was ejected from the event, Ms Truss took aim at what she called unfair process that disrupted people's lives. She pledged to clamp down on militant people who try and disrupt our country, whether from trade unions or environmental groups such as Extinction Rebellion. Another protester was later removed from the event after interrupting Ms Truss. Manchester United's Cristiano Ronaldo and Harry Maguire have received the most Twitter abuse of any Premier League players, a new report has found. Ofcom analysis of 2.3 million tweets in the first half of last season found nearly 60,000 abusive posts affecting 7 in 10 top-flight players. Half of that abuse was directed at just 12 individuals, 8 from United. However, the study by the Alan Turing Institute also found the vast majority of fans use social media responsibly. These findings shed light on a dark side to the beautiful game, said Kevin Backhurst, Ofcom's Group Director of Broadcasting and Online Content. Online abuse has no place in sport, nor in wider society, and tackling it requires a team effort. The report identified 2 peaks in the frequency of abusive tweets. The first came on the day Ronaldo rejoined Manchester United on the 27th of August 2021, generating 3 times more tweets than any other day, 188,769, of which 3,961 were abusive. At 2.3%, that is marginally lower than the daily average. The volume of posts can largely be accounted for because of Ronaldo's 98.4 million followers. On this day, the Portugal forward was mentioned in 90% of all tweets aimed at Premier League footballers and 97% of abusive tweets. The second peak came on the 7th of November when defender Maguire tweeted an apology following Manchester United's 2-0 home defeat by Manchester City. On that occasion, 2,903 abusive tweets were sent, 10.6% of the total that day, with many users reacting to Maguire's posts with insulting or demeaning language. The report also found a duplicated tweet using the same exact phrase was sent to Maguire 69 times by different users within 2 hours. The study says it is possible that this duplication occurred because users saw the abusive message and decided to replicate it, indicating organic organisation rather than coordinated behaviour. The Alan Turing Institute said that understanding the organisation of online abuse is of increasing interest given the harm caused by coordinated attacks and pylons. Other players were targeted by large volumes of abuse following a trigger, despite receiving relative few tweets overall. Newcastle defender Kieran Clark, now on loan at Sheffield United, was sent off against Norwich in November, with 78% of the abusive tweets he received coming on this day. Meanwhile, Crystal Palace's James McArthur was also the subject of a spike in abuse after being yellow-carded for stepping on Bukayo Saka against Arsenal in October. Researchers will also look at whether a spike took place when an incident that saw West Ham defender Kurt Zouma kicking and slapping his cat came to light, as that took place after the data was collected. As part of its preparation to regulate tech giants under new online safety laws, Ofcom have teamed up with the Alan Turing Institute, the UK's National Institute for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence, to analyse more than 2.3 million tweets directed at Premier League footballers over the first 5 months of the 2021 to 2022 season. This study created a new machine learning technology to automatically assess whether tweets are abusive, while a team of experts also manually reviewed a random sample of 3,000 tweets. Of that sample, 57% were positive towards players, 27% were neutral, and 12.5% were critical. The remaining 3.5% were abusive. Of the 2.3 million tweets analysed with machine learning tool, 2.6% contain abuse. These stark findings uncover the extent to which footballers are subject to vile abuse across social media, said Dr. Bertie Vidgen, lead author of the report and head of online safety at the Alan Turing Institute. While tackling online abuse is difficult, we can't leave it unchallenged. More must be done to stop the worst forms of content, to ensure that players can do their job without being subjected to abuse. So what are the recommendations? The UK is set to introduce new laws aimed at making online users safer while preserving freedom of expression, with rules for sites and apps such as social media, search engines and messaging platforms. Social media firms needn't wait for new laws to make their sites and apps safer for users, said Ofcom's Backhurst. When we become the regulator for online safety, tech companies will have to be really open about the steps they're taking to protect users. We will expect them to design their services with safety in mind. Supporters can also play a positive role in protecting the game they love. Our research shows the vast majority of online fans behave responsibly, and as the new season kicks off, we're asking them to report unacceptable abusive posts whenever they see them. Twitter says it welcomes such research to help improve conversations on its platforms, while also pointing to a number of online abuse and safety features it has implemented to stop such posts reaching individuals. A Twitter spokesperson said, "We are committed to combating abuse, and as outlined in our hateful conduct policy, we do not tolerate the abuse or harassment of people on the basis of race, ethnicity, gender identity, or sexual orientation." As acknowledged in the report, this type of research is only possible because our public API is open and accessible to all. However, our publicly accessible API does not take into account the range of safeguards we put in place, so this does not completely reflect the user experience. Twitter said that it had not seen the data, but claimed 50% of all violative content is found by its own processes to help the burden on an individual to report abuse, adding, "We know there is still work to be done." European footballers' governing body UEFA last month pledged to work with social media platforms to tackle online abuse as part of a respect campaign during the European Women's Championships. Other projects have included BBC Sports' Hate Won't Win campaign, alongside Sky Sports, one in April 2021. Football clubs, players, athletes and a number of sporting bodies undertook a 4-day boycott of social media in an attempt to tackle abuse and discrimination. The grass is always greener on the other side. Just ask Lisa Morris. Her Dartford lawn in Kent was brown. "It was shocking, a dead lawn," she says. "We'd never been able to maintain it and spent a fortune on grass seeds. We even put new turf down once. Nothing we did make it look nice. Then she had some artificial grass installed. It's beautiful, like an outdoor carpet. I want to get a sign saying, 'Please remove your shoes,'" she jokes. Like many others, now Miss Morris has greener, albeit plastic grass, as hosepipe bans kick in several areas across southern England in August after months of little rainfall. More people may be weighing their options. Lisa Morris is one of a growing number switching to artificial lawns over natural grass. In 2020, the global market for faux flora was estimated at around £2.4 billion, up from £2 billion in 2016. It is projected to grow to over £4 billion by 2027. Back in the day, these lawns were made from a polypropylene surface, which was a bit scratchy, says Andy Driver, Sales and Marketing Director at Evergreens UK, based in Rutland in the East Midlands, recalling school sport played on rough AstroTurf fields. Nowadays, they've made from polyethylene, which is a lot softer. It's got a much nicer feel and more aesthetically pleasing. The visuals are important for his customers confined to their homes during lockdown. Many Brits had little else to look at other than their own back gardens or balconies, so plotted home improvements, according to research from Mintel. Some households also had more disposable income to spend, as opportunities for days out or to take holidays were limited by pandemic measures. Mr. Driver says while the firm has seen sales increases over the last decade, this spiked in the last 2 years. These lawns are neat, clean and a vivid green, but is that the only green thing about them? Fake plastic grass was banned from this year's Royal Horticultural Society events, including the famous Chelsea Flower Show earlier this year. The RHS, the UK's leading gardening charity, said no fake grass would be allowed because of its damaging effect on the environment. Rigorous systematic research into the environmental impact of synthetic turf is still lacking, admits Professor Sebastian Fauch at the University of Western Sydney. But Professor Fauch is one of a group of scientists now working on a comprehensive assessment of the pros and cons of its widespread use in Australia, where cities are rolling out plastic turf at scale in public parks. For one thing, he says, plastic grass certainly needs water. New hybrid materials need watering to maintain the real turf in between the artificial one, so the argument of water savings is out of the window. Another area that needs further research, he says, is surface temperature. It is the hottest material you could find in playgrounds and school environments, he explains. I have measurements of surface temperatures of synthetic turf near 100 centigrades, and it can be a burn hazard if unshaded, even when your ambient air temperature is below 30 degrees. So how did Lisa's garden fare during the July heatwave when temperatures topped 40 degrees? It got hot, we had to put shoes on, just as you would if it were raining, but it certainly didn't melt. In 2018, a European Union report estimated that as much as 4 tons of microplastic from artificial sports pitches across Europe had made it into surface water. Dr. Tom Stanton, Research Fellow of Physical Geography at Loughborough University, is worried, saying microplastic particles can be washed off the plastic grass pitches into the surrounding terrestrial and aquatic environments. He said these particles can be ingested by organisms, causing physical harm, can leach harmful chemicals associated with their production into the environment, and can act as vectors for other pollutants in the environment. Although Dr. Stanton adds that while artificial turf could contribute to the limited drainage capacity of landscape like tarmac surfaces in car parks, but flooding should not be attributed to artificial turfs beyond the very localized. He adds, flooding, if it occurs in your plastic back garden, will likely remain in your plastic back garden. However, Richard Bunting of Rewilding Britain warns just manufacturing plastic lawns uses fossil fuels, meaning they contribute a larger carbon footprint than letting grass grow naturally. A natural garden actually soaks up carbon. Overall, the trend towards plastic grass is really worrying, says Mr. Bunting. We're facing a nature crisis where biodiversity is collapsing at a climate crisis. We're pedaling in a direction opposite to the one we should be going in. Last year, a study showed the UK is one of the most nature-depleted countries on the planet and has already lost around half of its biodiversity since the 1970s. One of the problems we have, Mr. Bunting says, is that we're a neat and tidy nation and we need to get over that. If you're lucky enough to have a lawn, let the grass grow, he adds. You can mow the grass nearest the house and that will mimic grazing areas in the wild. That'll attract birds and bees. An RHS spokesperson told BBC News, real grass lawns give lots of benefits for the environment, including absorbing carbon dioxide and creating a home for wildlife. Plastic grass can't do any of this and creates a sterile, lifeless area in the garden. Fake grass usually has to go in the bin when it's worn out and ends up in landfill. Unsurprisingly, Anthony Gallagher, managing director at Easygrass in Southall, West London, doesn't agree that artificial grass could be damaging for the environment. He suggests that people actually use less water maintaining lookalike lawns during dry weather versus grass. We're not removing grass in a lot of places, we're replacing mud. And he thinks the amount of microplastics getting into water from artificial turf is widely misunderstood too. It doesn't even compare compared to the world's biggest microplastic polluters. More plastic comes from washing clothes and car tyres. So what about recycling the lawn once it's no longer useful? In the past, the plastic lawn would end up in landfill, says Stefan Diderich, director of the EMEA Synthetic Turf Council. But he says advances in recycling technology means that it's increasingly no longer the case in Europe. If you think about the price of oil and plastic going up dramatically, instead of the plastic lawn carpet being waste, now it's valuable. He says there are specific sites to recycle plastic grass in Denmark, France, the Netherlands and Germany, although not yet in the UK. Andy Driver says that the industry is taking steps to be more sustainable, while the vast majority of lawns installed still include latex, which is difficult to separate during recycling. His firm will soon sell a new material that has been certified 100% circular by SGS Intron, a testing and inspection organisation. Back in Dartford though, Lisa has no plans to recycle just yet and thinks her lawns have changed her garden for the better. I still see it and it makes me smile. Newcastle has become the latest city to launch its bid to host the Eurovision Song Contest in 2023. Those behind the bid said it would be a once-in-a-generation chance to attract international visitors to the city famous for its Geordie welcome. Usually the winning country hosts the contest, but 2022's winner, Ukraine, is unable because of the ongoing war. Other cities hoping to host it include Leeds, Liverpool, Birmingham, Aberdeen, Brighton, Bristol and Belfast. The list of shortlisted cities decided by European Broadcasting Union will be announced on Friday. Cities are required to meet certain criteria to host the contest, including being within easy reach of an international airport and having enough hotel accommodation for at least 2,000 delegates, journalists and spectators. It must also have a venue which can accommodate about 10,000 spectators. One possible Newcastle venue for the musical extravaganza could be the 11,000 capacity Utilita Arena. Newcastle Gateshead Initiative, the NGI, is overseeing the bid on behalf of Newcastle City Council. Ian Thomas, Destination Director at NGI, said this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to welcome a huge number of international visitors, performers and media to the northeast of England, and to showcase our world-class culture, rich heritage and vibrant region to the world. The potential impact of Newcastle hosting Eurovision 2023 is phenomenal. Eurovision would play a significant role in rejuvenating and sustaining our visitor economy, supporting our businesses and creating an even better place for our residents. He said the city had hosted other large events such as the European Professional Rugby Club Finals, which he said attracted 95,000 fans to the region, and the 2019 World Transplant Games, which brought in attendees from more than 50 countries. Eurovision will be on an even bigger scale, and we welcome this fantastic opportunity to bring this to the region, he added. Ukraine's entry Kalush Orchestra won this year's competition in Turin, Italy. The UK was given the chance to host Eurovision after Sam Ryder came second in the competition. A spokesman for Newcastle Council said, "We are famous for our Geordie welcome. We stand united with Ukraine and would be the perfect host for Eurovision 2023. The winning city will be chosen in a two-stage process that assesses cities' capacities and capabilities. Once all the applications have been received, a shortlist will be announced on the BBC Radio 2 breakfast show on Friday." The number of people driving for Uber has hit an all-time high as concerns about the rising cost of living push people to find new ways to make money. Almost 5 million people are now picking up passengers or making food deliveries for the company, 31% more than last year, boss Dara Korashke said. Uber has been struggling with a driver shortage since the pandemic, leading to longer waiting times for customers. High petrol prices also make it harder to earn money on the platform. But Mr. Korashke said interest in driving for the company was accelerating despite these costs. That's right, more people are earning on Uber today than before the pandemic, he said in prepared remarks for investors to discuss the firm's financial performance. Against the backdrop of elevated gas prices globally, this is a resounding endorsement of the value drivers continue to see in Uber. Uber has been criticised for the treatment of its drivers. In the UK, the Supreme Court ruled last year that the company must count them as workers, but in many countries, including key markets such as the US, Uber classifies drivers as self-employed contractors, meaning that they are not entitled to benefits such as minimum wage or holiday pay. Uber has said drivers value the flexibility to choose their own schedules, but it has also responded to concerns, for example, introducing a fuel surcharge that customers pay to help offset driver costs. It also recently unveiled other changes, including allowing drivers to see how much they will make before agreeing to take a ride, aimed at making their platform more appealing to drivers. Rather than relying solely on financial incentives, our goal has been to improve drivers' overall experience, Mr. Kosho said. Higher demand, which had plunged when the pandemic hit in 2020, is also helping to attract drivers back. Uber said these were 1.87 billion trips on the platform in the April to June period, an average of roughly 21 million people per day, up 24% from last year and 12% more than were taken in 2019 before the pandemic hit. The rise in demand helped push gross bookings up 33% to £24 million. Revenue more than doubled to $8.1 billion, though some of that was due to a change to how the company accounts for its businesses. Despite the gains, the company lost $2.6 billion. It said more than half of that was due to a decline in the value of its stakes in overseas companies such as Zomato, Grab and Aurora. Uber's shares jumped more than 30% after the better than expected results. The numbers suggest a path for Uber to become profitable despite inflationary pressures and lingering driver shortages in some countries, said Dan Ives, analyst at Wedbush Securities. In a nutshell, despite rising ride share prices throughout the US and Europe, clearly consumers are still moving to the Uber platform, especially as travel, shifting to the office and other post-pandemic trends take hold globally, with Uber poised to benefit in 2023. One of Brazil's greatest jiu-jitsu champions of all time, Leandro Lo, has been declared brain dead after being shot in the head in a Sao Paulo club. Lo was one of the most successful jiu-jitsu athletes of all time, having won the world championships 8 times. Witnesses said Lo and his friends were approached by a man in a threatening manner. Lo immobilized the man, but after he let him go, the man shot Lo. The suspect fled the scene but has since handed himself in to police. An investigation for attempted murder has been opened. A friend of Lo, who was with him at the time, said a lone man approached their table, took a bottle from it and waved it around in a menacing way. Lo had pinned the man to the ground to calm him down, but after he let him go, the man shot Lo in the head, the unnamed friend told Brazilian news site G1. A lawyer for the Lo family, Ivan Siqueira Jr., said Lo and his friends had tried to prevent the incident from escalating. According to Mr. Siqueira, the suspect kicked Lo twice while the latter latter was already lying on the ground with a gunshot wound to his head. Lowe was rushed to hospital where he was declared brain dead. His family said his condition was irreversible. The 33-year-old won the World Championships 8 times in 5 different weight classes, an all-time record. International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation called him one of the greatest athletes our sport has ever produced. An example of a true black belt, martial artist and champion on and off the mats, the federation tweeted. A Dutchman accused of harassing a Canadian girl who later took her own life has been found guilty of multiple charges by a court in British Columbia. The charges against Aidan Coban, 44, included extortion, child luring, child pornography and harassment. Amanda Todd, who was then 15, posted a video in 2012 in which she detailed how a man had tormented her online. It was watched millions of times on YouTube and sparked a national debate about online bullying. Miss Todd took her own life just 5 weeks after uploading the video and shortly after explicit photos were leaked online. Coban was sentenced to 11 years in prison by a Dutch court in 2017 for blackmailing and harassing dozens of young women on the internet, some as far away as Britain, Canada and the United States. He was later extradited to Canada where he faced the additional charges related to making and distributing child pornography, extortion and harassment. He is not, however, charged with Miss Todd's death. Coban will serve his sentence, which will be decided at a later hearing in the Netherlands. A court following the verdict on Saturday, Miss Todd's mother, Carol, told journalists that she believed the court had sent a strong message that sextortion has consequences even across international boundaries. This day has been the best day since Amanda was born, she told Vancouver's City News. This day, Amanda's voice really shone through. Over the course of a 7-week trial that included dozens of witnesses, prosecutors argued that Miss Todd, who lived with her father in British Columbia, was pursued for years by Coban through 22 fake social media accounts. This harassment included requests to perform sex acts online and threats to send explicit photos to her family and friends if she refused. Coban's lawyer did not present any evidence in his defense. Prosecutors said that Miss Todd expressed on Facebook that a man had been blackmailing her for years. The harassment, they said, began just before she turned 13 in November 2009. Her mother testified that her daughter was scared because of the messages she was receiving online, and the teenager's distress grew with each incident. In the widely circulated YouTube video she posted before her death, Miss Todd said she was lured by a stranger online to expose herself on a webcam. She was then bullied by peers after the photos were published on Facebook and sent to people she knew. If I could say a message to Amanda, it would be that we always believed you, her mother told CBC outside the courtroom. This is her moment. The UK economy shrank between April and June as experts forecast a gloomy outlook with recession on the horizon. The economy contracted by 0.1% in the second quarter of the year, the Office for National Statistics (ONS) said. This was partly due to COVID schemes like Test and Trace ending, retail sales falling and the Queen's Platinum Jubilee bank holiday in June. The Bank of England has forecast the UK will fall into recession towards the end of the year as energy costs soar. Despite shrinking between April and June, the UK economy avoided recession because gross domestic product (GDP) grew by 0.8% in the first 3 months of this year. A recession is defined as the economy getting smaller for 2 consecutive 3-month periods. Up until now, more economists and the Bank of England did not expect a recession to begin until the final 3 months of 2022. Many expected a small rebound in economic growth between July and September, but the latest figures from the ONS have prompted some experts to warn that recession could come sooner than they had initially thought. The National Institute of Economic and Social Research said it expected the UK economy to continue falling over the next 3 quarters. Capital Economics said there was now a greater risk that the economy will shrink by 0.2% between July and September before worsening. But investment bank Goldman Sachs still predicted growth of 0.4% in the third quarter of 2022. A spokesperson said we'd previously assumed a sharp bounce back in July, but now expect a more muted rebound. HSBC's forecast was more positive. It said if the UK is going into recession, then we don't think this is the start of it. We still expect a bounce back in July, the reversal of the bank holiday effect to set the UK up for a positive Q3, as does the Bank of England. Kingdom Tengha, who owns a number of local bars and restaurants in Chester, says for him it already feels like the UK is in a recession. I think we are not too far away from it because of the inconsistent blows we're getting from energy bills, from people not going out, to the cost of living. It just seems that we're heading this way. He says his business is currently in survival mode. It's not about making money, it's not about trying to expand or trying to grow our business, it's just about stabilizing the business, especially after the pandemic over the last 2 years. Mr. Tenga says the biggest issue he's facing is rising costs, with everything from poultry to vegetable oil soaring in price, while the amount of money his customers have in their pockets is going down. Energy bills are ridiculous, the cost of fuel is ridiculous, and I appreciate people don't necessarily have the money or can't spend what they used to because everyone is so worried about what the bills are going to be. The UK is facing the worst rate of price rises or inflation in 40 years as energy costs continue to soar. Commenting on the 0.1% contraction between April and June, the ONS said that the biggest contributor was from human health and social work activities, as COVID test and trace and vaccination programs were wound down. There was also a fall in retail sales volumes. However, it said areas such as tourism, bars and entertainment showed strong growth. Health was the biggest reason the economy contracted, as both the test and trace and vaccine programs were wound down, while many retailers also had a tough quarter, said Darren Morgan, Director of Economic Statistics at the ONS. These were partially offset by growth in hotels, bars and hairdressers, and outdoor events across the quarter, partly as a result of people celebrating the Platinum Jubilee. This included rises in mobile food stands and takeaway food shops. The ONS said in June alone the economy shrank by 0.6% in June due to the extra bank holiday to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. However, that figure was much better than the 1.3% fall predicted by economists. The ONS said that while the bank holiday impacted on monthly GDP, it had little impact on the quarterly figure. The Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi told the BBC that these are challenging times. What the numbers show today is that the contraction is partly because of some of the COVID activities reducing, but also real resilience in the private sector, which actually in many ways bodes well, but nevertheless these are challenging times. But Labour accused the Conservatives of losing control of the economy. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves said, with the Bank of England forecasting recession lasting the whole of next year, the Conservative leadership contenders need to stop playing to the gallery and start coming up with a serious plan to get Britain's economy back on track. A big part of the drop in gross domestic product in June was because of the Platinum Jubilee, which meant 2 fewer working days of producing goods and services, in contrast to May, which had 1 additional working day. It was always expected that this would magnify the downswing from May to June, and economists expect a sharper drop in activity. 0.1% drop over the 3 months from April to June was only half as bad as some economists thought. Nevertheless, given the backdrop of the global squeeze on incomes due to soaring energy prices, no one can say this drop in activity is just a blip. The squeeze on the hard-pressed consumer is tightening its grip, with activity in consumer-facing services down by 4.9% compared to before the pandemic. And with France, Italy and Canada seeing growth, no one can say this is a stellar economic performance. All in all, it's not yet the recession the Bank of England had forecast, more a precursor. The Bank of England is expected to raise rates later by up to 0.5% point. Rising interest rates can affect people in different ways, often creating extra costs and worries. But while it can increase the cost of borrowing, hitting business plans or mortgage hopes, savers may give a small cheer. The BBC spoke to 4 people anticipating a change in the circumstances as a result of the expected rate hike. London-based Patrick Reed owes thousands on credit cards and loans and fears an interest rate rise will cost him. I have personal loans and credit cards totaling £25,000, so any increase will be hugely noticeable. At present, I repay about £1,800 a month, but I've worked out that I will conservatively need to pay another £250 a month to keep up with the debts. My income is good as I own my own business, and hopefully that will continue, but if my customers drop off, it will be financially painful. I will simply have to tighten my belt and be extra cautious in my spending, which means all of those non-essential items will be cut from my budget. I'm very worried about future rate rises. I honestly don't think the UK can take another hike. It will cripple the economic outlook and businesses will suffer. Wayne Trim, 38, works as customer services manager at Morrison's in Verwood, Dorset. He's worried about the impact of rising interest rates on his mortgage. I'm paying £515 a month at the moment. Every 0.25% rise adds around £45, so a 0.5% rise means easily over £600. That could start hindering my commute to work. I moved to a new store a little while ago. It's an hour's drive. They did give me a pay rise to move stores, but I needed a new car, which took a fair chunk off my pay rise. I bought a hybrid. I'm spending about £200 a month fitting it up. If you look at everything globally, everything is going up. Fuel, food, we can look at the food shop and be a bit more crafty with that. I do get a discount for working at Morrison's. You think you're in a position where you're financially comfortable, and then all these things start. It's like a never-ending cycle of trying to make ends meet. I'm also repaying some loans. That's about £270 a month. That finishes in April, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm a simple person. I don't understand why they're doing the rate increases. They tell us it's to curb borrowing, but all it means for me is I'm cancelling Netflix and Amazon. Louise Parker and her husband have been saving to move home in Brighton since 2020, but are having to have a major rethink because of rising interest rates. I know that we are in a very privileged position to be in a home that we own in the first place, with a decent mortgage rate fixed for 2 years, but we've had to substantially actually reconsider the amount of money we can borrow. It's meant we're looking at smaller houses, which, considering we were wanting to move to start a family, is making us wonder whether we should bother moving at all. Our options are either to stay put where we are or move to something about £200,000 cheaper than we had hoped. We're also worried about how long we should fix for if we move. We don't want to be stung after 2 years if rates have gone up even more or have to downsize because we can no longer afford the repayments. It's just such an adjustment to have to think about interest rates. It's a new hurdle in the mix. Edmund Wood is having to save to buy a home close to London, so hopes an interest rate rise will help his deposit grow more quickly. He also hopes rising rates will help the rum business that he owns. An increase in interest rates is good for me. I'm saving up a deposit, so more interest will mean my savings will go up quicker. And as I look further ahead to actually buying a house, I've been worried about rising property prices. They have climbed every month for the last 12 months in a row. That wouldn't be good if I was ready to buy now, but in 2 years when I've saved up during a period of increasing interest rates, hopefully house prices will fall again, which will leave me in a position to buy. Also, hopefully by then interest rates will have stabilized somewhat, meaning I'll be able to get a stable interest rate on a mortgage. I think rising interest rates will also be good for my rum business, even if they bring inflation down. That in turn should reduce the cost of living, leaving people having more money in their pocket at the end of the month. Paula Jebs-Byrant runs a small manufacturing business in North Wales called Dr. Zig's Extraordinary Bubbles and fears a rate rise will put her expansion plans into jeopardy. We're ambitious and currently expanding globally and finding growth in export markets, but with expansion on the cards, we look to borrow to increase production and outputs and manage their growth. Increased interest rates will make this hugely more risky and challenging. It will bring into question the viability of our UK manufacturing base. I'm also concerned that if our trade customers can't borrow, they will then cut on their spending and their purchases from us. We will all be affected.